Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, we're talking about science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM. How do we help our young people, especially in the diversity of communities? How do we help those young people understand that they can excel in STEM? Well, our guest this morning is a physicist for more than 2 decades, and he joins us to talk about what he's doing to be the change that he wants to see. Don Prier is our guest this morning, and we welcome him all the way from Houston, Texas. Don, good morning and welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Don, let's talk about your journey into math and science and all that it took to become a physicist.
I can tell you that what was really important to me is having access to role models. Um, that was a big deal. As a matter of fact, my father is a PhD chemist from Louisiana State University, LSU, and
And he's also he's a native Louisianian from Avoyelles Parish, Bunkie, more specifically.
no, I'm sorry, Mansura, Louisiana.
Mansura.
But yeah. So I actually was fortunate to have my father there to pretty much be a role model for me, as well as my mother. Both of them are graduated from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We're all proud Jaguars. But the thing is about my father is that he would spend a lot of time with me and my younger brother and sister doing all kinds of crazy experiments and looking at the stars, and he was doing all this stuff while he was working on his PhD. And then after he got his PhD, he started introducing me and my younger brother and sister to different people that were professionals in the field, as well as other fields, and also had obtained their degrees in their terminal degrees, their PhDs. Um, as a matter of fact, Dr. Hugh Perry has been one of my younger brother's role models. My younger brother, Marcus Prier, looks up to Dr. Perry quite a bit. Dr. Perry's actually from that.
Avoyelles Parish?
Yes, ma'am, Avoyelles Parish as well. But the thing is that by having access to these men, they actually opened doors and opportunities that we got to meet other engineers and scientists, and at one point, scientists who actually always scientists that you would see on television. As a matter of fact, because of the experiences that I had from that were created by my parents, I found myself working in California for a government lab, and where I met one PhD that introduced me to my wife. And this PhD, his name is Hakeem Olasei. He before he got his PhD, he and I were friends. But the thing is that like now, I hear from him all the time, and he's on the Science Channel. He's always
Wow.
interviewed by CNN. When we had robotics tournaments, he actually comes to town and actually has been very supportive. But the thing is that's been very powerful about that is that this figure, who's actually this figure, Hakeem, is also on the outrageous acts of science. And so he's all in the STEM. I'm all in the STEM. And this man he calls my school regularly, talks to my students, my own children, and also has been there where my kids can actually touch these people. And what I mean by touch is, when you're in the same room with someone that's nationally and internationally known, it kind of helps your self-esteem and your confidence.
So let me take you back to a young boy and watching your dad become a scientist. When did you know that you had a knack for math and science? Because in order to become a physicist, you've got to be strong in math and science.
Well, I can tell you that in my case, most kids don't listen to their parents, which is kind of funny. And I was one of those kids. But it was the other people that were in the same circles as my parents that were from Avoyelles some had degrees, some did not have degrees, that would come over and see some of the stuff that I was doing, some of the projects I was working on, some of the big old airplanes I was building. Um, and they would say, your mom and dad let you do that? I'm like, no, they don't just let me do it, they do it with me. And so they wanted to do stuff like that too. So when they would come to our house, they would be involved. So
So was
really,
your house like a big laboratory for experiments?
no, no. Actually, we lived in a very well. I don't want to say a very small house. I guess it's all relative, but to some. But our house was, I think it was like maybe 1,000 square feet somewhere.
I'm not necessarily talking about the size. I'm talking about the way that your parents let you, especially with your dad being a scientist, the way that he let you interact with and touch and assemble or disassemble things that you were interested in.
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, this is funny. When you asked the question about the laboratory, there's a structure behind me. It's a black structure that has like my kids' trophies in it. Well, that piece of furniture was part of my mom's dining room set, and I remember them bragging, "Oh, we spent like $2,000 on this." And they're all excited about it. It's a big fancy dining room set, and there was a table with it, and it was, I mean, and we were only supposed to sit at that thing when we had guests. Well, at one point, my dad and I were building these airplanes on this table, and she would look at me and she'd roll her eyes, and I'm like, and she'd say, "If you get glue on that table," and I was like, "No, ma'am, I'm not going to get glue on that table." And so, but one time I did.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so we didn't have a big laboratory, but the point is that they would let me do some of this crazy stuff, even in the house and in the fancy room, because it was, to them, it was more important that I got to learn about my, or develop my craft. It was all that tangible stuff about, the table and stuff. They didn't care about that. All they were interested in is watching me grow and learn.
So when did they know and when did you know that you would be gifted to go on and do something great?
For me, after I graduated from high school, like everyone would tell me I had it, but I didn't kind of believe it. And then my dad was like, "Well, why don't you go to Southern like we did? Because I think it'd be the perfect place for you to get all your skills together. Because we know you have it, but try Southern. Let's see what happens." And I got there, and like every other student, I was like, "Oh my God, this is different." It's like, of course, every boy sees girls, and then, and then on top of that, it was all the pretty girls were like on the other side of the campus, and then all of a sudden I found myself where I didn't have time to talk to them, and I found myself stuck in the physics department. I found myself doing a lot of experiments with a lot of professors saying you can go do pretty much the same thing my mom and dad did. They opened up rooms where the professor would have the key. Basically, what I'm saying is they would just let me go in these rooms and try these experiments. And a lot of my smart friends or the pretty girls or whatever, they all knew that I was smart too. So all of a sudden they would start gravitating toward me. And next thing you know, we're doing, in rooms in the physics department, I'm running like a study session.
Wow.
Where I have all these people. Then they were just asking me questions. How do I do these problems? I got to get through this class. And so at one point, one of the professors noticed that and said, "I'll offer you a scholarship if you keep this up." And with that scholarship, his name is Yola Bagayoko, and there was two, Yola Bagayoko, and the other man, his name was Chia Yang. The two of them, Dr. Yang and Dr. Bagayoko, said, "We're going to give you the scholarship because you got talent." And with that, also, the doors opened. It was like the floodgates opened. Next thing you know, I was in California.
Wow.
Working for this guy named Keith Jackson, doing this, working on this thing called electron storage ring. I didn't even know what that was. And I got there and I'm like, wait, I think I remember reading about this. I'm not, is this right? This is a structure the size of a football field. And all it does is it spins electrons around.
Wow.
And, yeah, and I'm like, I'm part of this now? I'm working with real scientists. And then, I found myself meeting like, oh goodness, his name will come to me soon. But a lot of these scientists that were part of the the Manhattan Project as well as Los Alamos. I found myself working at Los Alamos National Laboratory, a government secret lab. I mean,
Wow.
all of that, all the gates opened up
Hold
for
that
me.
thought. Hold that thought, Don. We're going to
Yes,
take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the great possibility and how we help our children understand that STEM is open and available to all who are willing to work. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Don Prier. He is a physicist, and he is talking about really bringing the next generation into science, technology, engineering, and math, and his love for STEM and teaching others. And so before we went to break, you were talking about really the love and how science transported you to a place in time that you could have never even have imagined. What was that like?
you know, for me, it was amazing to find myself working at facilities where a lot of great technology evolved, was developed. When I found myself working at Los Alamos National Laboratory,
Tell us what that is for those of us who don't
it's
know.
sure it's a government secret lab, or it used to be a secret lab, uh, where weapons or nuclear weapons are developed um, and tested. As a matter of fact, some of the greatest footage that you'll see on television, where you see nuclear weapons being detonated, it all came out of Los Alamos. And so,
And how
I,
was it that you came to Los Alamos?
well, I while I was at Southern,
Why did you chuckle?
yeah, because the thing is that I'd been married for a little while. My wife was in the picture, and so she was trying to follow some of this stuff that I was doing. Uh, she's a Stanford graduate, but she wanted to try the the Southern University Historically Black College experience, and so she got to be there too to go through this with me. But I got a phone call one day from the physics department. Dr. Bagayoko said that these people. They have this fuel cell project, and it also is it's in a very unique location at the facility. Um, I think you guys need to go and work on this because I know Prier likes to blow stuff up or something like that. And yeah, and so because my dad, who's the other Prier, is the chemist, and we blow stuff up all the time. So,
Okay.
yep. And so my wife was like, "Well, what am I going to do?" And I'm like, "You know what? I bet you if you talk to somebody, you'll get a job there too." And she did. She
And what does
managed.
your wife do?
Monica is she has 2 degrees from Stanford. She's a project manager here in Texas. She does a lot of data science research, but she's also an engineer.
Wow.
So yeah, we have girls that, between her and I, we mentor. It's not just boys in my case. Well, I focus more on working with boys. She focuses on girls. So that's
So
another story.
so 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 she's so you tell her if she can probably find something, but you're going. You got to go.
Yes, yes, I've got to go. And so I get to the lab and I have this really great boss, and he's like, "Well, most of your experiments are going to be in this building that like only you have access to." And
Wow.
I'm like, "Okay." And so I worked in this group called ESE DX. DX is weapons.
Wow.
So I didn't understand what that was until I got there. And so
Were you scared? Was that scary?
at first I was scared because Los Alamos is like on this plateau, which is like a mile up, and when you got to drive up this road that's like on the side of this mountain, right? You're just driving around and around and around, and finally when you get to the top, you look down and it's like a house was like a dot. For real, and like you're way up, and then it's just this big city, and it's like no, actually, let me rephrase that. It's like Mansura, Louisiana, and like to get to Marksville, it'd be like there's a bridge, and the bridge is like not even a quarter of a mile. And when you drive across this bridge, I mean, you look down and like a house looks like a dot. So you're way, way up. And so where I worked at was on one of the plateaus that's actually far away from the downtown, but it's like it's secluded, and you got to go into this little funny building. And but the thing is that was scary about it all was that not only was it high up, but when you're in there trying to do work and you hear boom. So because the military and Los Alamos, they have these contracts where they're doing these, shape memory type explosives and all kinds of other stuff. So they were doing all that kind of stuff. So while I was there, and I'm doing my work with fuel cells, and it was the coolest thing. Like we got to work with like the like my area at one point became electrochemistry, designing experiments for electrochemical devices. And then all of a sudden we had this scientist show up from NASA, and he's like, "We want you to look at this weird paper." And I'm like, "Okay, it's just Torre paper, carbon paper, whatever." And we use this on fuel cells, and he wouldn't tell us what fuel cells, but he said there was some kind of incident, and these fuels, and this was used in fuel cells, and he wouldn't tell me what it was. So we're like, okay. So we're playing around with it, trying to figure out why it failed in a fuel cell device that's used on a spacecraft. Well, the spacecraft was the Columbia.
Wow.
Yeah, this was before the Columbia. I believe it was the Columbia. But the point, yeah, I think it was the Columbia. But the point is that it was from the space shuttle, more importantly. And so there had been a fuel cell failure. This had made the news, and about 4 months later, after the shuttle had landed, and this was back in, just to give you a frame of reference.
Sure.
This was back in 1998 is when we were examining what had happened. So it was the Columbia. We were examining what had happened to the fuel cells, why there was a fuel cell failure. And so I got to be part of a project like that, but it was so secret at first. And then finally, around the last day is when they tell you what it is. And it was like, wow,
So you didn't even know what it was
No,
initially,
I didn't know what it
but
was.
they wanted to know why it had failed.
Yes. And then after we started drawing our conclusions and we presented it, that's when they told us what it was from, So
Was that from the actual explosion of?
oh no, ma'am, no. This was I think the Columbia's explosion it was like in 2003, 2004 time frame.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but this was one of their earlier flights, and there was a fuel cell failure on board. And the fuel cell is an electrochemical engine that actually provides the electricity and drinking. It provides drinking water to the astronauts, and it also provides electricity to the spaceship. So they typically have 2 to 4 of them on the ship, and one of them had gone out. And so that's what we got to examine. We got to pull it apart. We got to play with the paper. We got to put it back together, examine it, run it through different type of microscopy. We did all kinds of stuff with that. But yeah.
Wow. And how satisfying was it for you all to find out why there was the failure?
I'll be honest with you. When you work on a project like that and you figure out what it's about, it's like, then all of a sudden it's like, you can't tell anybody about it. And you're like, no. So I'm so excited. I'm like, oh my God, and they're like, well, you can't talk about this, and they'll tell you when you can talk about it like later, but you couldn't talk about it. So, and so it was one of those projects. Like I got to work on several like that actually, but to me, that was like one of the biggest high profile projects I had ever worked on.
Amazing. Let's do this, Donald. Let's get a break here. But when we come back, we're going to talk about you coming back to Louisiana, more specifically, Avoyelles Parish, to put on a robotics workshop for young people and to really help them to understand how they too can experience the wonders of science, technology, engineering, and math. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, we're exploring science and technology and engineering and math. And our guest this morning is a physicist for more than 2 decades. His name is Donald Prier, and we're talking about his journey. But now we're shifting, Don. You've had all of these incredible experiences, and you and some of the other scientists are coming back home, so to speak, even though it wasn't necessarily where you were raised, but your dad was raised in Avoyelles Parish, and you guys thought it was important to come back and do this project, Project One Avoyelles Robotics Program. Tell me why.
Well, I can tell you that for me, I had been exposed to so much. I mean, putting things into space, working on projects or items that came from space, you know, working on devices that were used for counterterrorism, working on computers and building computers that, I build the whole thing and it works. The thing is that I thought about a lot of my own relatives that come from that region, and even myself, having been out there in the summers, it's almost like a lot of the stuff that I had done it was unimaginable. And in other words, when I would explain to people what I was doing, they were kind of like, "You're kidding. There's no way." I mean, believe it or not, social media has made it very possible to show people this is what I do. This is real. But the point I'm getting at is that when I was there, I lived every summer, and every summer and Christmas we'd go to Mansura, and there wasn't anything to do. And so the point I'm getting at is I would since I couldn't find anything to do, I would talk about a lot of stuff that I would do, or I'd go make something. And what I'm trying to say is that looking back, I realized that most of the kids that were there, they don't have access to a lot of stuff that I'd seen or I had done. And I could look at I was trying to look at things from their perspective, and I said, man, I wish I could share with them some of the stuff that I know how to do. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that most of the kids that grow up in that region, they might not, they may learn how to fix a car, right? But they'll fix it in such a way that they're just getting by. But what I learned with just a little bit of education, that you can be really powerful really quick. And what I'm saying is that I had those opportunities. I knew where my I come from. I see what my parents had done. I saw and I saw what my relatives, what they could do, and they're very talented. They just didn't have access to the technology or people who had been doing stuff. So my aunt Thelma, between her and my mom, they were like, Don, you need to go back there and teach a robotics class. You need to go do that. You've been doing that, and your kids are really good at it. I remember your kids were like little bitty, just little bitty things. They couldn't do it. You know so much. You always have a story. You should go back there, talk to these kids, make them laugh like you make us laugh, and expose them to some of that stuff that you're doing, especially with those robots.
Wow. And
So,
so do you think that the possibility, and possibility is a word that I love, but how do you find that group of kids, or are they all kids and then you just kind of figure out who's talented?
you know, the one thing that has got me excited about this program, this Project One of Wells program, is that I'm able to teach those kids some very difficult concepts in 4 days. And normally in the regular schools, it normally takes me maybe about 2 months. Those kids are hungry. They want this. They want to learn about technology. They want to learn, or they want to see what were those stepping stones, or those little steps that I made that ultimately got me to where I am. And they're trying to also, what really throws them is when I bring my own daughters there, girls that can program robots that are anywhere from the size of, this little Lego robot. I don't know if you can see it,
I can.
but they program little robots like this to all the way to robots that weigh 160 pounds, move 35 miles per hour, and could probably kill a man. My daughters program those. And when they, and it's all over the internet, but when they see that my kids started off with these small Lego robots, and now, I mean, right now, my kids got people coming after them trying to give them scholarships. And my kids, or my oldest kid, I'm sorry, my oldest kid, that actually is what happened to her. She found herself where she was a junior in high school, and they were giving her scholarships to go to all these different places, NASA,
Wow.
Europe, and come learn about robotics and show us what you know. And the next thing you know, she became a physicist. My oldest daughter is a physicist. My
Wow.
second daughter wants to be an engineer. Same thing. She started off with those little Lego robots, and all of a sudden, kids get hungry. They're like, "Well, when can we go from the little robot to the big robot?" Oh man, you sure you want to do that? Are you ready for this?
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden, you put that piece of metal in front of them, and you give them some nuts and bolts, and you teach them how to torque, what torque is, and what different types of screwdrivers are. Next thing you know, you got girls challenging boys. Oh, you should know what a pair of pliers are. And the boys are like, oh, no, I've been using these forever because I used to work on my dad's car. And it's funny because my girls will say, oh, yeah, I did that with my dad quite a few times. We put our own brakes on the car. Oh, yeah. And you know what's funny? The funny thing is that all of a sudden these kids will connect on Facebook or something and go look. There are videos of my daughters pulling out parts off of cars and fixing them.
I
And they're
love it.
like, well, how did you do that? Start off
Amazing.
doing things like this.
I love it. So tell people, Don, before we've got to let you go, how they can connect with the upcoming robotics seminar that you're doing.
I can tell you this. Oh, yes. There is a flyer. It's a very simple flyer that's gone out. Uh, it's this one. This time we're last year we ran the program in Marksville. This year we're running a program in Bunkie, and so there's a flyer that Phyllis Morris, I believe, has access to. It's also on the internet. There's a Project One Avoyelles page, and also my father, Donald Prier Sr. He actually also has access to that flyer, but
Absolutely. What we'll
definitely.
do is we'll get that flyer and we'll try to throw it up on the screen so that everybody can connect with it. When is it going to start?
It starts on the 22nd of this month. So still got a couple of weeks. We're still taking kids. We're trying to cap it to 24. If we run over, I don't turn kids away. So, and my last thing is I just want to say is that if you have kids that have done it before, I would love it if they could come back and
Absolutely.
share their experience.
Absolutely. Donald, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing such great possibility with all of us this morning, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
I appreciate you in this interview so much.
Indeed. We'll be talking again soon.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Hey, everybody. Donald Prier has been our guest. He's a physicist, and he is being the change that he wants to see. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This is my final point on point today. You know, I'm so proud, first of all, that Donald is a native Louisianian, but he's from the parish, technically. You know, he didn't grow up in the parish, but his family did. And whenever you see people who have gone to do, we can't even begin to tell you all of the great things that Donald has done as a physicist in this hour. But any time that people look back at humble beginnings and remember those summers of coming to Mansoura, Louisiana, coming to Avoyelles Parish and not having anything to do, it really gives you pause because he could be doing anything, but he has made a decision that I want to reach back. And you know the saying, each one teach one? Well, that's what he's doing. He's giving what he has, and he's using his resources to come in and say to young people that science and technology, engineering, math, it's possible for you. It is possible. And that he's not an anomaly. And that it's like he said in the conversation, he said, you know, when my dad was growing up, we were surrounded by scientists that we could touch and feel, and we could ask questions, and we could explore. And oftentimes, kids from underserved communities don't get that opportunity. I guess that's why I'm super excited about it. And when you see the way that Donald still lights up about STEM and about teaching his own girls and trying to help to translate this gift into the next generation. See, sometimes our kids can be so talented and so smart, and it can get misconstrued because they become troubled children. Not because they're not smart, but because they haven't been given the tools and the skills to flesh that brilliance out of themselves. So they become problem kids. They're bored. They're unengaged because they're not being challenged enough. And when we start to take kids that are so talented and we start to tell them who they are, like he said, somebody told him how brilliant he was and how bright he was. And we as a people and as communities are not telling our kids enough who they are. And then we take it a step further. We help them to get the skills that they need. We help them to stay in school. We help to aim them in the right direction. And those are just a few of the things that we can do to start. Instead of looking at what's wrong, let's take the time to look at our kids, have conversations, and begin to hear them and see them. And then when we do that, we start to set them on the right path. Sometimes you might be the only person that can speak into a child's life that empowers them. And we need to be mindful of what we're saying, and we need to make sure that we are speaking good, positive things into young people that we meet. Anybody can talk negative, but can we turn that around and find the good? And that's what Don and the team of people that are coming to Bunkie are going to be doing. They are going to be helping kids explore something that maybe they've never seen before. That's my final point, on point today. Stay with us. We're back to wrap up right after this.